Some talent acquisition teams are purely transactional, while others have become trusted talent advisors. But the most effective teams are going even further by influencing outcomes through coaching and genuine partnership. Keep listening to find out how they do it. Support for this podcast comes from Greenhouse. Greenhouse is the only hiring software you'll ever need. With built-in analytics that deliver on-demand insights, Greenhouse helps hiring teams align faster with stakeholders and make more confident hiring decisions. Greenhouse Analytics empowers recruiting teams to explore data freely. No add-on tools are needed. Query, filter, and build reports, drill into historical trends, and create custom analyses to answer critical questions on pipeline health, performance, and sourcing efficiency. Greenhouse has helped over 7,500 customers across diverse industry verticals from early stage to enterprise become great at hiring, including companies like Airbnb, HubSpot, Lyft, SeatGeek, HelloFresh, and DoorDash. If you're ready to navigate your hiring data your way, you can visit greenhouse.com to learn more.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 737 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. In order to survive as a function, it's clear that TA teams need to become strategic partners to their businesses rather than just service providers. But what does that really mean in practice? It's easy to talk about being strategic, but the execution of it is where most teams struggle. The challenge isn't just about new processes or technologies, it's about fundamentally different ways of communicating with hiring managers and stakeholders. It's about asking better questions, listening more effectively, and knowing when to challenge decisions without creating unnecessary friction. So, how do you build a TA team of talent partners? My guest this week is Jeff Sotto, Head of Talent Acquisition for the Americas at Sony Music Entertainment. In our conversation, Jeff reveals the specific techniques his teams use to partner with the business, and why communication skills matter more than ever in our age of technology-driven disruption. Hi, Jeff, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure. I'm Jeff Sotto. I lead the talent acquisition team for the Americas for Sony Music Entertainment.
We're going to sort of dive into a lot of things around talent acquisition and where it's going, and particularly where teams are going. So just to kind of start us off with, what do you think it is in this ever-changing, disruptive world that we're now living in? What do you think it is that are the most essential skills that TA teams need to be effective at the moment?
For me, looking at what's going on right now, and I'll take a step back, is we're in such a period of crisis, change, and chaos, and it's happening at breakneck speed from an external factor. There's various conversion factors, whether that's social, political, cultural, financial. It's happening at such unprecedented speed than we've ever seen, and those external factors eventually impact internal in terms of organizations. And when you think about TA and you zoom in, how people seek out career opportunities, what they value, how they sort of experience the world of work, it's going through really a metamorphosis. So it's important to set the stage there. So I think what that means is essential human qualities like empathy, adaptability, agility are more important than ever, and only, I think, will continue.
Obviously, with this, talent acquisition is evolving. There's lots of talk about TA teams becoming genuine or true talent advisors to the point where it's almost a kind of a bit of a buzz phrase. I mean, what does that mean to you? And is that the right direction to be going in?
I think it's part of the conversation. I don't think it's the end result. So let me give you the context there. I think if you step back and look at TA when I started many moons ago, oftentimes TA was in this order taking role, right? So essentially, do you want fries with that? And then I think it evolved to more of advisory. Here's what we recommend. Here's what you should be doing. That's great. Yet I think to make a significant impact, at least for the teams that I've led, is to move towards more of a TA partner focus, and that's influencing outcomes. And for me, that's done through adopting a coaching-like mindset, where in an advisory role, you're making the recommendations, you're telling people what to do. When you adopt a coaching-like mindset, you're coming from a place of curiosity. You're asking insightful questions. You may also be challenging as well. And you're really practicing active listening throughout. So it's a much deeper conversation to get to the outcome that you're looking for. So for me, advisor, yes, that's part of the continuum, if you will. Yet at the moment, I really encourage the teams that I lead to move more to a TA partner influencing outcomes.
Yeah, how does that kind of transformation take place? I mean, how do you build a coaching mindset within your team?
I think it's adopting basic principles of coaching. And I'm in no way suggesting that someone goes out and gets certified with the coaching degree. You certainly can. I see a lot of people doing that. Yet adopting basic principles such as active listening, which is hearing what someone is saying, you're attuned to their thoughts. It's a very non-competitive way. And there's various degrees of active listening from 1 to 3, which of course we can go over. The aspect of gaining clarity. So if you're confused about what someone said or the rationale behind it, being able to come from a place of curiosity, ask those questions. And number 3, summarizing. It's just playing back what you're hearing, not introducing new thoughts, as essentially playing back what you're hearing from your stakeholder, from your hiring leader, from your HRBP. So those simple steps in terms of active listening, gain clarity through curiosity, and summarizing can make a world of difference. Obviously, there's some mechanics to that. Yes, at a fundamental level, that's what I encourage my teams to practice.
Break down those mechanics for us a little bit more, just in terms of doing this really well.
So when it comes to active listening, there's different tiers to that. At a very basic level, you're listening to someone, you may not be fully grasping what they're saying. You're tuned in at a very transactional level. At a number 2 level, you're grasping what you're saying, yet you may have some distractions. Where at a number 3 level, that's where you're able to turn that conversation into an active, non-competitive two-way interaction. So you're in tune to what the speaker is saying. You're centered yourself. You're not focusing on what you're saying next. So you're really withholding judgment. And that's an extremely important key of it, where you're not coming in with assumptions already made about the person. If you have that, you're putting that to the side. And at that point, you're open to new ideas, fresh perspectives, and sort of the art of the possible. So in summary, that's active listening. I think it's extremely important. I think oftentimes as TA, we call our recruiters TA partners. We recently made that shift. Oftentimes, I've heard some recruiters operate in a very transactional script, right? They're going through the motions, and a lot of TA teams do that to sort of centralize how the team is showing up, or for consistency. Yet the problem with that is, if your recruiters are using this very scripted way, they're not able to adapt to the conversation. They're not able to explore different concepts. They're not able to I think move in a coherent and cohesive manner throughout the conversation. So I think it's important to have a framework, maybe of the questions that you're asking. Yet with active listening, it does encourage that recruiter to say, hey, I'm going to be tuned into you. I'm going to stay centered, and I'm going to be open to new ideas, fresh perspectives, versus coming in maybe with assumptions and offering a very scripted transactional experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of reaction do hiring managers have? Because in the same way, lots of recruiters are used to operating in a transactional way. Lots of hiring managers are used to dealing with recruiters in a transactional way.
Yeah, I think that would more show up in the gaining clarity. So active listening really is for the listener, right? They're tuned in. The next phase of that is gaining clarity. So if a recruiter is confused about what someone said or the logic behind it, I oftentimes have seen recruiters not ask, right? If the hiring leader comes out with a very technical term or they use an acronym, some recruiters may shy away from asking versus saying, hey, that's really interesting, can you help me understand when you say this, what does that look like? Or when you say you want someone with excellent communication skills, tell me more about that. Or if someone says, I need an introvert versus an extrovert, like, hey, let's explore that more. So I think that's going to be key to often challenging the hiring leader in a non-adversarial way. And usually it flows to a natural conversation. And I'll give you sort of something in sharp contrast. If the recruiter comes in and said, well, why are you asking for that? Why do we need that? The why could conjure up a threat level in the hiring manager. It's a bit defensive. It could be seen as adversarial in a subtle way. Where if you come from a place of curiosity and say, "Help me understand," or "Let's explore that more," you reduce that threat level from the hiring leader, and they're more open to exploring. So I would say it flows into a natural conversation. So the next basic principle is summarizing. So if you think about you're coming in as an active listener, you're withholding judgment, assumptions, you're tuned in to the speaker, you're asking insightful questions, you're coming from a place of curiosity, and you're really focusing on those doorknob questions, right? What does that look like to you? Tell me more about versus why. The next piece is summarizing, and that simply involves receiving what the speaker said in your own words, while summarizing means condensing the main point. So it's really focusing on those headline pieces. So within that, you want to stick to the salient points. You want to recognize the speaker's perspective and refrain from introducing new points. So let's say you're in a kickoff and the hiring leader has said something. It's like, hey, I just want to pause here. Let me make sure I get that correctly. This is what I heard from you. Does that sound about right? So what that does is you're acknowledging what the speaker is telling you, and you're also getting clarity for yourself that you understood it correctly. At that point, it gives you opportunity to maybe lean in with a different perspective and maybe introduce data or insights. Or if you fully agree to it, then you're aligned. Yet that simply just sounds alignment. I can't tell you how many times TA partner recruiters have come to me and said, hey, I didn't quite understand that, or I didn't get summary. So it's a simple way of playing back what you heard, acknowledging their perspective, and then gives you opportunity to challenge and introduce new perspective at that point versus early on in the conversation, which can create friction or resistance from the speaker.
And then kind of the persuasion part of that. So you kind of set that sort of the atmosphere of curiosity and exploration. How do you then persuade them away from, certain ways of thinking or making certain decisions that wouldn't be appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's where you can bring in data, analytics, insight, say, hey, when we've done this in the organization, here's what we found to happen, right? When you want to review sort of every resume in the ATS, often we find a hiring leader is really short on time. You're spending a lot of unnecessary time where you can get back into adding value for your business. That's just a very transactional example yet. It's, I think, being able to offer up data, analytics, or experiences where we've said, hey, when we've gone this direction, we've ended up with this outcome. When we've gone in that direction, oftentimes it hasn't been very favorable. So essentially, we're not telling them what to do. We're giving them solid examples, whether that's through data or whether that's through experiences that we've had in terms of outcome.
The whole of the data piece around TA is kind of constantly evolving and is much more sophisticated than it was even a few years ago. How is that playing out? What do you find the most useful part of that? What kind of analytics and data are kind of the most meaningful?
I think it depends on the situation. If you're going into as to recruit in a new market, obviously, if it's a situation where you don't think you have the talent in there, that you have the data to back it up. In any case, though, I think it should be in the form of storytelling. And what I mean by that is you're just not sort of rattling off data. It needs to come from a place where it's coherent, it makes sense, that it's cohesive, and it's woven into a story. And ultimately, it has maybe like an aha moment or some type of focus back to the outcome that you want to get to, whether it's in the direction that you think is the right way to go, or if you're trying to steer someone away from it.
And what part does technology play in this in terms of process or interfacing with hiring managers?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're solving for. There's obviously tools out on the market. LinkedIn has their own data collection, and I've used that at past companies. Internally, we pull data together in terms of a TA dashboard around our own data and analytics. So I think it depends truly on what you're solving for. There's different external platforms you can go out and different internal. My experience has been it's not so much the lack of data, it's how it's being used. Are you just bringing it to the table and saying, hey, I found this and here's what you should do, versus making it a conversation? You may not lead with it, yet it may end up being woven through the conversation at some point. And that's again where that coaching like mindset coming in, where you're actively listening, like what's the problem that I'm hearing, or what are we solving for? And that's done through that gaining clarity in terms of curiosity.
And I suppose pulling all of that together from a TA team perspective, so that coaching, that partnership role, how do you think that comes together in terms of sort of building the TA team of the future? Where do you think we're kind of going with all of this? What could a TA team look like in 18 months, 2 years' time?
For me, and again, I think I should set the foundation of my experience and expertise. So I've been mostly in Fortune 500 organizations where there's a high degree of complexity with the roles. There's a level of specialization, nuance, etc., versus high volume. So I haven't been in the high volume business for years. I think that's important because oftentimes I hear when recruiter leaders talk, sometimes they speak from like a high volume perspective or more experienced hire. And I do think you have strategies for those different outcomes. So I think it's important I mention that. For my team at the current moment and where I'm going is more of a modular approach. So less of we have TA partners dedicated to specific functions or departments versus what's the skill set of the talent that we're looking for, what level of stakeholder engagement is needed, and what's the level of difficulty. So let me give you context. Oftentimes, I've seen some outcomes not come out so great because you may have sort of one standard level of a recruiter. And for me, at least, I think there's a difference as to when you're recruiting sort of early career entry level versus trying to influence an EVP on an SVP hire. Tactically, the recruiting style looks different. The level of engagement is going to be more intense and more difficult as you work with higher levels. And overall, the way in which you interface with candidates is going to shift. So I think for me, it's about how do we develop a modular team that, broadly speaking, can lean into various roles at different times as skill sets change? Do we have different levels of recruiters that are meeting the moment in terms of what business outcomes we're looking for? And how do we keep those skill sets sharp with the team?
Comes back to those core communication skills, doesn't it?
Yeah. For me, that's what it always comes back to. I think is how someone shows up in a kickoff, how someone is influencing difficult conversations, how someone is keeping composed and centered when the waters are very treacherous. So again, I think it goes back to those essential human qualities. Because at the end of the day, you can have a very bright and bold TA strategy. You could have a new glossy ATS system. Yet if your recruiters are not being developed from a communication perspective, that is going to significantly, I think, erode the outcome that you're looking to get.
Humans still front and center in the process.
Yes, with the, obviously valuing data and analytics on the way and being able to adapt and shift where necessary.
Jeff, thank you very much for talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure too.
My thanks to Jeff. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also search through all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com, where you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.